freeing up time and generating revenue so police can better protect us from serious, violent, and unsolved crimes. The system needs changing. Yes, on 91, it's about time.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. Welcome to the show. It is Monday, October 20th, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for being here. We have got so much to bring to you here. We are just 2 weeks and 1 day away from legalizing marijuana here in the state of Oregon, and I couldn't be prouder of our campaign to end adult marijuana prohibition through Measure 91. You can check out more about Measure 91 at VoteYesOn91.com, and they're still looking for volunteers, phone bank people, monetary donations, anything you can do to help. They got yard signs, they got t-shirts, they got stickers. Make sure you get those out and tell your friends to vote. The turnout is what's going to make the difference in this. The people of Oregon want to legalize marijuana. We just have to make sure they vote to do so. Also, speaking of the vote, coming up on Tuesday, November 4th, it's Marijuana Election Night 2014, right here, live at 420radio.org. We'll be bringing you all of the coverage from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, from the Great White North of Alaska to the Sunshine State of Florida and everywhere in between. In fact, all the way out to the other side of the world in Guam. We'll be bringing you all of the headlines for marijuana legalization, medical marijuana, and decriminalization. Join us on Tuesday, November 4th, live here at 420radio.org. Now, on today's show, all sorts of stuff to get to, including in our Behind the Headlines segment, a new report out from the Marijuana Arrest Report Project, funded by the Drug Policy Alliance, showing, well, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. They got a new mayor in New York and a new police commissioner, but it's the same old stop and frisk and the same old racially disproportionate arrests of New Yorkers. New York still leads as the marijuana arrest capital of the world. We'll tell you the details behind that report in Behind the Headlines. In our drug war data mining today, I'm going to bring to you 5 brand new commercials that I made over the weekend based on the No on 91's press conference. That's right. No on 91 actually made points that were on our side. They actually made points that convinced me we even need to vote for marijuana legalization more. We'll see if you feel the same way in drug war data mining. Then at 1:30, we visit with Dr. Mitch Earlywine like we do every Monday for our cannabis Q&A. We'll be taking your live questions at 971-533-7111, or you can ask via our chat room on Ustream, and we'll talk to Dr. Mitch about all of the latest headlines in cannabis science, including the claim that marijuana could cure Ebola. We'll get Dr. Mitch's feelings on that issue, and believe me, he won't pull any punches on this one. Also on the show today, in our Radical Rant segment, I'm going to take a look at some of the op-eds and some of the scaremongering going on from the No on 91 campaign out here in Oregon, and the simple sound bites and logic you need to debunk that to anyone who might bring it up in front of you. It's pretty pathetic these days, but we'll give you those tools anyway. But all of that comes after the 420 radio news, which is right after this first break. And in the news today, a shocking headline that health officials in Colorado are considering a near total ban on retail marijuana edibles. The Florida campaign for medical marijuana gets a great cash infusion last week. We get the results from the DFW Dallas Marijuana March that took place on Saturday. A Colorado company is looking to make marijuana breathalyzers. We got some sales figures from Spokane, Washington, showing how much Idaho is contributing to Washington's tax base. And the country of Uruguay is struggling to enact its marijuana legalization proposals. We'll tell you all about it in our 420 radio news coming up next. I'm Russ Belville. This is the Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org. We're back after these messages.
Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts.
In all my years on the streets, it's hard to recall a single time where marijuana use itself was the cause of a violent incident. As a police officer, I do believe that passing ballot measure 2 will allow law enforcement to focus on serious issues in Alaska. To me, the regulation of marijuana means safer communities. I'm voting yes on 2.
This communication was paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Top contributors are Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, and Thomas.
Drug Policy Facts, replaying Fridays at 11 Pacific.
Voting yes on 2 will allow doctors to recommend the medicine they feel will ease the pain and suffering of thousands of sick Floridians. Yes on 2 allows medical marijuana use under the strict supervision of a doctor, only for debilitating conditions and diseases such as cancer and MS. 23 states now keep government and politicians out of the doctor-patient relationship, and it's worked. Vote yes on 2 and trust our doctors to do what's best.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
This is your 420 Radio News for Monday, October 20th, 2014. Health officials in Colorado are calling for what is nearly a full ban on retail marijuana edibles in the state, just 10 months after the first recreational sales of marijuana began. Quote, prohibit the production of retail edible marijuana products other than a simple lozenge hard candy or tinctures that are plainly labeled using universal symbols and that users can add to their products at home, end quote, Colorado Health Department officials wrote in their recommendation obtained by the Huffington Post. It continues, quote, hard candy lozenges would be manufactured in single 10 milligram dosages per lozenge, and tinctures would be produced and labeled with dosing instructions such as 2 drops equals 10 milligrams, end quote. The Colorado Department of Revenue's Marijuana Enforcement Division, which oversees the state's marijuana industry, including the sales of edibles, will make the final rules based on the recommendations from the working group and state lawmakers after the 2015 legislative session. Florida's People United for Medical Marijuana raised over $500,000 last week to promote their proposed constitutional amendment known as Amendment 2 that would legalize medical marijuana. In all, People United for Medical Marijuana has raised over $5 million and received almost $2 million in loans while spending almost $6 million as of October 10th. Much of the spending was needed to gather petition signatures to get on the ballot. The ballot initiative has run into well-funded opposition from a political committee known as the Drug-Free Florida Committee, which had raised about $4.74 million as of October 10th, almost all of it completely from Las Vegas casino tycoon Sheldon Adelson. North Texans in support of medical and recreational use of marijuana took to the streets in Dallas Saturday for a cannabis rally. Nearly 5,000 people were in attendance to help bring awareness to marijuana law reform efforts in Texas. Organizers for the event said the march allows people to come together and actively further the discussion about marijuana in the state. Quote, that's what I'm concerned with is getting sick people who are dying a chance to improve the quality of their life by ingesting some cannabis, said demonstrator Sean McAllister. McAllister also argued that weed can be taxed and regulated. The group says their primary focus now is supporting the medical use of marijuana in Texas. Demonstrators believe once that is accomplished, they can begin the push towards full legalization of marijuana in the state. A maker of breathalyzers used to detect blood alcohol has landed a $250,000 grant from the Colorado Office of Economic Development to develop a similar instrument to assess THC impairment. THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. The grant, which requires matching funds from the company, will allow LifeLock Technologies to speed development of a tool that will be marketed to law enforcement, corrections, schools, and workplaces. The grant flows through the Colorado Advanced Industries Accelerator Program. LifeLock, which is traded over the counter, makes evidential breath alcohol testers for use by law enforcement and the workplace. Last week, we learned that 2 pot shops in Vancouver, Washington, across the border from Portland, Oregon, sell the most marijuana in the state. Today, we learned that after 3 months of being legal, Spokane County has raised $3.6 million in sales from in out-of-state sales, totaling, Spokane County has racked up $3.6 million in sales out of statewide sales totaling $14 million, much of it from bordering Idaho. Quote, Idahoans, they come in for a quick stop. Logan McDermott, a Spokane pot retailer, told KHQ-TV. Idahoans make up about 25% of our clientele. McDermott said nearly 100 people do business at his shop each day. Uruguay is struggling to roll out commercial production and sale of marijuana, and its groundbreaking experiment could be dropped or watered down if an opposition candidate wins this month's presidential election. Uruguay needs to work out how to ensure criminal gangs do not finance producers, how to regulate the supply and quality of locally produced marijuana, and how to satisfy neighboring states that legally grown dope will not be sold illegally on their streets. The government has missed its own deadlines in implementing the changes that were passed into law last December. The plan to start selling marijuana in pharmacies late this year looks unlikely, as the government is still tendering cultivation licenses and identifying where seeds can be purchased from. Given the delays, leftist President Jose Mujica now faces a race against time to push through the changes before the country's next leader takes office in March. This has been your 420 Radio News for Monday, October 20th, 2014. I'm Russ Belville. .420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012.
The doctor has the right to prescribe OxyContin or any type of prescription like that. They should have the right to recommend medical cannabis for that same patient.
In the 1980s, my mother asked me to help a friend of hers who was terribly nauseous and vomiting every single day from her treatment, and my mother begged me, since I was a young adult, could I find marijuana for this woman? And it's a crime that even all these many years later, we still have to illegally get this treatment that really makes a difference for people.
The real concept is Amendment 2 would allow for medical decisions to be made by doctors instead of politicians.
We're asking you to please vote yes on Amendment 2 November 4th, because there are patients that need medication in this state, and they deserve it.
I am.
United for Care.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less.
I'm Pete Tupmark. I spent 33 years in law enforcement, from deputy sheriff to sergeant, working 10 hours a day protecting Oregonians. Last year in Oregon, there were 13,000 citations and arrests for marijuana. That takes time. Time better spent solving murders, rape cases, finding missing children. The system is broken. Measure 91 regulates marijuana for adults, so police have time to fight serious, violent, and unsolved crimes. It's about time.
Welcome back, everyone. 13 after the hour. My God, I'm having a hell of a Monday today. It's 13 after the hour, and time for us to go behind the headlines, where race, class, and marijuana arrests. We continue to see the disparity, the racism, and the volume of marijuana arrests in New York City, despite a new mayor. The new report comes out from the Marijuana Arrest Research Project, and this shows us that the New York Police Department, under Mayor de Blasio, made slightly more total marijuana possession arrests in March through August of 2014 than in the same 6 months in 2013 under Mayor Bloomberg. We move from Bloomberg to de Blasio, but the arrests stay the same. In the first 8 months of 2014, 86% of the people arrested for marijuana possession were blacks and Latinos, 10% were whites, and 4% were all others. The New York Police Department continues to arrest blacks at 7 times the rate of whites and Latinos at nearly 4 times the rate of whites. But young whites use marijuana at higher rates than young blacks and Latinos. Looking at these arrests, May through August, in all but one of those months, there were more arrests under Mayor de Blasio than under Mayor Bloomberg. In May of 2013, Mayor Bloomberg had 2,700 arrests. De Blasio had 2,600, but in every other month, there were more arrests month by month under Mayor de Blasio. And in previous, as is the case here in New York City, most of the cases of low-level marijuana arrests happen commonly when marijuana is found in someone's pocket after a frisk or a search, or in their backpacks when they're ordered by the police to empty their pockets or backpacks. And folks, if you don't know it, New York State is a decriminalized state. That's right, it's decriminalized. You can't get arrested for being in possession of an ounce or less of marijuana. So how are these people getting arrested? Simple. When the stop and frisk happens, or when the cop smells marijuana, he orders the kid to either empty his pockets or take the stuff out of the backpack. Most kids don't know they have a Fourth Amendment, and they just go ahead and comply with it, hoping that that'll be less trouble for them. And what they don't know is the minute that marijuana is seen in public view, it's now an arrestable misdemeanor. If they'd had just left it in their pocket, just left it in their backpack, and then the cop had to search and get it, it would have just been a ticket. But when they take it out voluntarily and show it in public, that's an arrestable misdemeanor. And this reprehensible stop and frisk practice has been brought to the attention of the NYPD and the prior mayor to show how it's being misused by the NYPD to target young Black and Latino men. And they promised they'd do something about it. The last commissioner, Commissioner Kelly, said we need to stop all this stop and frisk and to leave these people alone, and yet it's still happening. Most of the people that are arrested for marijuana possession were under the age of 26. 56% of them under the age of 26. 29% of them were just teenagers. And 74%, almost 3 out of 4 of the people who are getting arrested for marijuana possession in New York City in 2014 have never been convicted of even a single misdemeanor. That's right. 3 out of the 4 people who are getting criminal records for marijuana in New York City, thanks to these stop and frisk practices, have no prior record whatsoever. They were going to go through their entire lives not being a criminal, not having a criminal record, but for getting caught with marijuana by the NYPD through a stop and frisk. That's almost 2,700 people per month in New York City over the past 6 months, actually March through August, that now have criminal records thanks to this stop and frisk practice. And people, we need to make sure everyone understands that this is a permanent, non-expungible criminal arrest record. And thanks to the internet, the next time one of these kids wants to go get a job, the employer can find it. Wants to rent a house, the landlord can find that. Wants to get a loan at a bank, credit agencies, they'll all look that up and they'll have that information. They want to get an occupational license of some sort, the Occupational Licensing Board will have that information. They want to go to school, the school will have that information. This is despicable and it needs to stop. And a very high-ranking New York politician said this about this, quote, "Low-level marijuana possession arrests have disastrous consequences for individuals and their families. These arrests limit one's ability to qualify for student financial aid and undermine one's ability to find stable housing and good jobs. What's more, recent studies demonstrate clear racial bias in arrests for low-level possession. This policy is unjust and wrong." Now, who was the high-level New York official who said that? Mayor Bill de Blasio, as he was running for mayor in 2013, used the issue of the disproportionate racism and practices of stop and frisk to win election, and now hasn't done a damn thing about it. And make no mistake, this is all about being white and rich. If you want to smoke marijuana in New York City, it's damn near legal. Take a look at the arrest rate at the Upper East Side. The Upper East Side of Manhattan, facing the Central Park, the $1 million penthouses in Upper East Side. What's the rate of marijuana arrests there? 10 per 100,000. Now, take a look at East Harlem North. East Harlem North, a predominantly poor Black Latino area. What's the rate of arrest? 1,128 per 100,000. You are 112 times, 113 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana in East Harlem than the Upper East Side.
Oh, I could have smoked that pot.
Not in East Harlem, you couldn't, Homer. I don't know what the laws are like in Springfield, but the New York Police Department continues to make New York City the marijuana arrest capital of the world. For shame in a decriminalized state. We'll be back with some new Yes on Measure 91 commercials from the No on 91 campaign. Stick around.
420 Radio, your ticket to the Boston Freedom Rally. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. Got a comment, question, complaint, or request for 420radio.org? Visit our contact page at 420radio.org/contact today. The Marijuana Business Association, or MJBA, are proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show. It is the mission of the MJBA to establish integrity and legitimacy, create common market standards, provide market intelligence, and develop best ethical business practices for participants in the emerging legal marijuana industry, including commercial hemp, medical marijuana, and recreational marijuana for adults. Learn more about the Marijuana Business Association and visit mjba.net to join today. That's mjba.net. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
All right, welcome back, everyone. 22 after the hour, and this weekend I decided to take the video from the No on 91 press conference and turn it into some Yes on 91 advertising. If you were watching it along with me the other day, we openly laughed at a few of the things being said by the No campaigners because they just didn't realize what they were saying really made the case for legalization. This first one will explain to you how desperate they are to try to scare us about marijuana in Oregon.
How desperate is the No on 91 campaign to scare you about marijuana?
A couple of things that he talks about is the advocates of this Measure 91 want you to believe that marijuana has medicinal value, which couldn't be anything further from the truth.
The truth is regulation is a better approach than prohibition. Vote yes on 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91 campaign.
I got to say, folks, you got to be really, really desperate to try to float the "there is no such thing as medical marijuana" balloon in Oregon, where we've had medical marijuana since 1998. We've got 69,000 patients, and twice our legislature has voted to expand medical marijuana. Now let's get to one of these where Connie Ramakers makes the point as to why we've got to legalize marijuana to save the children. I couldn't believe she actually said this at the press conference. Amazing.
A mom and grandma from No on Measure 91 explains why to vote yes on Measure 91.
I see what's happening with marijuana. The kids are telling me. They say within 5 minutes they can get marijuana. It's much easier than tobacco or alcohol to get into their hands.
Because drug dealers don't check ID. Vote yes on Measure 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91 campaign.
Yeah, it's something when the No campaign is using our talking points that it's easier for kids to score marijuana than alcohol and tobacco. I was stunned that they actually said that. We've also got Dr. Kimber Richter. She's a member of Project SAM's board of directors. And of course, Kevin Sibet flew her out there with all the talking points that she would need to help to defeat marijuana in Oregon.
Project Sam's Kimber Richter for the No on 91 campaign worries about marijuana's social cost.
We won't even be able to project what the public health harms will be. And the cost that we're seeing now, the $1 in tax revenue for the $10 in social costs, who knows where that's going to be with marijuana.
Colorado and Washington have made $45 million in tax revenue to date, yet nobody claims they've suffered $450 million in social costs. Learn the facts. Vote yes on Measure 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91 campaign.
Yes, the classic Sabbath conjecture, because toxic and addictive disease and violence-causing alcohol and tobacco cost $10 for every tax dollar they bring in. The same thing would be true for marijuana, that's far less addictive, far less harmful. It just makes no sense for anyone that applies just the simplest bit of common sense to it. Now, in this next commercial, we get a drug rehab professional trying to scare us about all the teens in rehab for marijuana without realizing he's also making the case for legalization.
Drug treatment Dr. Ronald Schwartzler from the No on 91 campaign explains why to vote yes on Measure 91.
There's no adolescent treatment, by the way, in the state of Oregon. You cannot get your adolescent treated. You almost have to wait till they're 18. By then, the damage has been done.
Measure 91 devotes 25% of marijuana tax revenue to drug prevention, treatment, and mental health programs. Get the facts. Vote yes on 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91 campaign.
Of course, it's also important to recognize that 61% of the people in rehab for marijuana and a full 54% of those who are there for only marijuana were forced there by the criminal justice system. I'd be upset about losing 3 out of 5 of my forced customers too there, Dr. Ronald. All right, one more commercial. This one comes from Mandy Puckett herself, the drug rehabber who is the spokesperson for the No on 91 campaign. Enjoy.
Mandy Puckett, head of the No on Measure 91 campaign, worries about marijuana advertising.
Again, the biggest concern that we as moms have is how this is going to affect kids with mass commercialization, advertising, promoting, normalizing marijuana use. That's what comes along with Measure 91.
Measure 91 Section 7 grants the OLCC the power, quote, to regulate and prohibit any advertising. Get the facts. Vote yes on Measure 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91. 420 Radio, freeing your mind 24 hours a day.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher.
I'm Lori Constantino, former Chief Prosecutor for the state of Alaska. As a retired law enforcement official, I know our current marijuana prohibition laws just aren't working. In fact, they've caused far more problems than they've solved. It's time for Alaska to take a more sensible approach. That's why I'm voting yes on ballot measure 2.
I'm Bill Parker, former Deputy Commissioner of Corrections in Alaska, and I'm voting yes on 2. For me, it's a matter of public safety. We have limited law enforcement resources, and they should be spent addressing serious crimes, not arresting thousands of Alaskans for marijuana.
And I'm Kim Cole, a local high school teacher and a mom, and I want to see marijuana handled in a way that actually benefits Alaskans. The marijuana industry should be managed by responsible businesses and not criminals. This means safer communities, revenue for the state, and jobs for Alaskans. I'm voting yes on 2. This communication was paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Top contributors are Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, and Thomas Co.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times Magazine. Get your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
Welcome back, dear listeners. It's 1:30 on a Monday, and that means it's time for our Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. How you doing, Dr. Mitch?
Wild day.
Yeah. Okay. Been a pretty good weekend out here on the West Coast, and we're glad to have you here on the show. Want to remind everyone in the chat room that you can get your questions ready now for Dr. Mitch, or if you want to call in live, the phone number's on the screen, 971-533-7111. But we always start off this segment by giving Dr. Mitch the first word in cannabis science, and I know what's on his mind. Dr. Mitch, you got to tell us how pot's going to cure Ebola, right?
Alas, I wish people would stop saying that. I actually am going to probably get something on the Normal blog about that this week, because no, as good as CBD may be for your immune system, it is not going to kill Ebola. Woo.
I bet you've been getting a lot of questions about that, though, lately.
Sad but true. Between Facebook and the 420research@gmail.com, I've had quite a few, and it's, I admire everybody's optimism, but let's not hit the Harlequin and then suddenly go out there thinking we're immune.
Okay. So what do you have for us for the latest in marijuana science and studies?
Two things out today that kind of blew my mind. First of all, I have to confess that I've often said you can't get a positive urine screen from just sitting around other people who are smoking. George Bigelow's lab basically had people sit in a really small room while 6 other people smoked some 11% THC cannabis. And if you use the low cutoff, that 20 nanograms per milliliter cutoff on the urine screens, they did test positive even though they didn't actually smoke pot. It really does look like they must have been in an awfully small room, and certainly would have gotten a buzz on this, though, so I want to emphasize that was a predicament. And the other complete mind blower is Nadia Solowich from Australia, who never used to ever say anything good about cannabis ever, just published a paper showing that basically cannabidiol can be vaporized from a special 600 milligram source that's actually not cannabis, which the thought of her even administering any kind of cannabinoid in the lab just completely floors me.
So are some of these anti-pot folks from the past, these researchers, recognizing the handwriting on the wall and figuring they got to get in front of this thing?
I feel like she must have gotten funding. I mean, in Australia, it's not these giant grants that a few people get. They're pretty generous with small grants to lots and lots of researchers. But, the fact that she basically is now giving CBD in the lab is very, very different from anything she's done up till now, that's for sure.
All right. Now, on that former story about the hot box and testing positive from secondhand smoke, does that not provide some defense maybe for people getting fired or, busted for testing positive? Is that possibly the defense lawyer is going to jump on this?
I am quite optimistic that a number of judges are going to be hearing about this in the court really soon. I can't say they wouldn't have experienced some subjective effects under these circumstances. I've only got the abstract. I want to see if I can get the dimensions of the box, so to speak.
There you go. And you said it was if we were testing for the lowest threshold at 20 nanograms. What do you have any idea how many workplaces or schools test at what levels? I guess 50 is the normal.
50 is the usual, and there was only a single positive at the 50 cutoff, so I'm certainly going to try to argue for that one from here on out. That 20 is pretty rough, and as we know, some of the driving ones are even lower than that, and I just find that pretty reprehensible.
It's interesting how we're getting all these different levels where, states like Colorado and Washington have set a 5 nanogram limit. The NFL had a 15 nanogram limit that they're going to bump up to a 35 nanogram limit. Major League Baseball uses 50. The World Anti-Doping Agency uses 150. How come they can't come to an agreement on what they're looking for?
Well, and the sad thing is none of those have really co-varied with any kind of impairment that's at all meaningful. The fact that the NFL or the sports communities think, cannabis is some kind of doping agent is just so preposterous. I don't know whether to laugh or cry.
All right, we got some questions coming in from our chat room. Isla Siegel would like to know what kind of cannabis is good for menopause and hot flashes.
Well, so we're still gathering data on that, and we don't have any strain-specific evidence. I've heard good things about juicy fruit for some of the gastrointestinal type symptoms associated with menopause, but it's literally just anecdotal stuff. So I I can't swear by it, but juicy fruit would be my first recommendation, at least based on what I've heard.
Isla lives in Colorado, so we'll have her test each strain and report back.
Okay, great.
Canna Justice in the chat room would like to know, he says, the endocannabinoid system. Why do doctors not learn about this, and how do we get them to?
The bottom line was, at least when I was at USC, I got to give at least one lecture about that over at the School of Pharmacy and over at the med school. And slowly but surely, this is picking up. I have a wonderful student at the Albany Med School here who's spreading the word on that. But in truth, it hasn't been a target for a lot of the medicines that we have, and so that's been in part why physicians haven't really focused on it. It just hasn't been particularly practical for the drug companies who are going to be, sending them their medicines. I think as more and more data are coming out and as attitudes change, they're certainly going to get individual lectures on it, and it won't be long before there's a semester-long class on the endocannabinoids.
Yeah, we really need to have that happen. I recall some survey showing something like 13% of medical schools were teaching about it now, or some low number like that.
I mean, it's embarrassing. The number that are even teaching about nutrition is remarkably low, too. So, I mean, there are just some things where our model of what is medicine has kind of gotten in our own way here. It's not about prevention. It's about treating people after they're already sick.
All right. We're speaking with Dr. Mitch Earlywine, a marijuana researcher and expert, and taking your live questions at 971-533-7111. Also picking up the questions from the chat room. And in the news today, I told the story of how a Colorado company has gotten a $250,000 grant to try to develop a THC breathalyzer. Do you hold much hope for the ability to either come up with a breathalyzer or some sort of point of detection, instant way of knowing how high someone is?
I mean, I want to emphasize, too, that they have to kick in $250,000 of their own, right?
Yeah,
and this is not just some charity, shall we say, coming out of the Colorado area there. I'm not optimistic about this, and I wish they would focus more on impairment, because I think for $500,000, you could develop a pretty stellar measure of how well somebody is functioning on psychomotor tasks that correlate highly with driving. And I would rather see somebody, basically have to, walk a line or juggle or any kind of motor task that's actually going to predict driving ability, rather than put something weird on their fingers to see if they've touched pot recently, or get something in their mouth to see if there are any THC residue or something like that. It's just not going to be the kind of predictor of the behaviors we really want.
Yeah, I think the only real predictor of how high you might be would be if you go to talk to the cop and smoke is coming out of your mouth. Then maybe. Maybe they got you. There was a report that came out, a little bit of controversy involved with this. The folks out at Project CBD have a report on the hemp oil scammers, supposedly Canaway, Cannabis Science Inc., and I forget the other one, that are trying to produce these CBD oils supposedly derived from industrial hemp and supposedly legal in all 50 states. Had you seen the report, and do you have any comment on it?
I mean, the report is 30 pages, and it's pretty extensive. And I'll tell you, they did their due diligence. They were extremely open-minded. They did the testing. They've done really everything they could possibly be expected to do without shelling out a ton more cash. And I'm afraid their conclusions are pretty much consistent with some things I've written in the High Times column over the last couple of months. It's just you can't really get high-concentration cannabidiol out of stems and things like that. And then this tacit assumption that it's all legal. CBD is still a Schedule I drug in the eyes of the federal government. So this, hey, we can mail it to you and nothing to worry about, and, try our gum, it'll make you live forever. Those claims just really are inconsistent with federal law and with the data that we've seen gathered by Project CBD.
Another story out today talks about the Colorado Health Department making recommendations that nearly all medicated edibles should be banned in Colorado, leaving only hard candies and lozenges because, adults don't like candy and cookies and gummy bears and stuff. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's really all a question of dosage. There are tons and tons of edibles in Colorado that are only 10 milligrams in a dose. They're extremely well marked. They're clearly delineated, and I think certainly any recreational user can handle that. And I feel like it puts medical users at a real disadvantage. The oral administration is super good for insomnia and things where you want that slow but steady presence of THC and its metabolites in your system. And so I just think this is really misguided. If they want bigger letters, if they want more elaborate labeling, by all means. But to try to ban these is really just going to create an underground market in edibles.
Yeah, it's like, do you want to go from the brownie that's got a label and tells you how much THC it's got in it versus the one that somebody makes in their pan at home and sells anyway? It's I think Mason DeVert had it right that the people of Colorado voted to keep this stuff regulated. They didn't want it to be unregulated.
That was the point. And in truth, they're not the ultimate in accuracy yet, but I feel like we're just a couple of steps away from making everything just ideal. And, the tacit assumption that these have to be removed, there's just no way to fix it, is completely unfair. All
right. And, of course, we got Halloween coming up in a couple of weeks, and the annual trick-or-treat scare is out that for some reason someone's going to put a $15 Chiba Chew in place of a 5-cent Tootsie Roll in your kid's bag. Any thoughts on trick-or-treat and keeping the kids safe this Halloween?
I mean, it's funny because all those old legends that we used to hear back in the 70s and 80s about, razor blades and things like that have pretty much been disputed as urban legends in the Culture of Fear book by one of my colleagues back at USC. And I honestly don't think anybody wants to put a $10 edible into some little kid's bag. I don't think that that's very likely. If you see, lemon drops or watermelon things or stuff like that that isn't wrapped or isn't individually wrapped and you don't want to bother with it, throw it away. And if you do want to hand out candy that kids are going to feel good about, I would focus on individually wrapped candies.
There you go. That's wise advice for any trick-or-treat in any state.
In the topic of edibles, if folks are willing to go to my Facebook page, I do have a uncomfortable edible survey link. Should be at the top of the page. If anybody's willing to fill that out, it'd be a big help for me so we can get a little data on this topic instead of just talking shit.
And your Facebook, just Mitch Earlywine?
You got it.
All right. And also email at 420research@gmail.com. Thanks, Dr. Mitch. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks so much.
When we come back, we've got some more debunking of the No on 91 campaign through 6 infographics. Stick around.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, your ticket to Seattle Hemp Fest.
My name is Ryan Dazel, and I work for a textile manufacturing company, and before that I used to be a farmer. I am a supporter of Measure 91, the legalization of marijuana here in Oregon, but not only for that, for the legalization of industrial hemp. Hemp is related to marijuana, but hemp is not a drug, and we still can't grow it here in Oregon. Measure 91 will fix that. Oregon is a great state to grow hemp. We have the right soil, the right climate, and it's a great cash crop for Oregon farmers. Anywhere you can grow corn, you can grow hemp, except no herbicides and minimal amount of pesticides are needed for this crop. The hemp clothing you see at the store and the hemp seed you see at the grocery store all comes from overseas and our neighbors from the north. That's money we could be keeping here in Oregon. Farming is a difficult business, and with a cash crop like hemp, it can make all the difference.
In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Well, there's this girl on my block. Every time I see her, she asks me to get high. And every time I tell her that I'm not into that. She says all the kids are doing it. If that's true, then why doesn't she find someone else to do it with?
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. It was a nightmare scenario last May for one Southern Oregon woman. It's 4 a.m. and someone's trying to break in.
911 emergency.
My ex-boyfriend is trying to break into my house. He put me in the hospital a few weeks ago, and I've been trying to keep him away.
But because of budget cuts, the sheriff's office is only open during weekday business hours.
I don't have anybody to send out there. So if he comes inside the residence and assaults you, can you ask him to go away? Or
He did break into the home, and he did rape and choke this woman. Meanwhile, it was announced that the Oregon Sheriff's Association made a $100,000 donation to the campaign against Measure 91, the initiative to legalize marijuana. So there's enough money to protect people from marijuana, but not rapists? Measure 91 devotes 35% of tax revenues from marijuana sales to state and local police. Vote yes on Measure 91. A message from the Russ Belville Show, not endorsed or sponsored by the Measure 91 campaign.
You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, immorality in general.
How in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Or do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 46 after the hour. And today for the rant, I want to tackle this postcard that's being sent out by the No on 91 campaign. You know, they don't got a lot of money. They got about $167,000. $165,000 of that came from the sheriffs and the narcotics officers. And so they don't got a lot of money for TV commercials and all that. What they have sunk their money into is a mailer, a little postcard. And on the one side of the postcard, it's got a full-color picture of a bunch of different edibles from Colorado. And on the back side, in black and white, it's got just a shotgun approach to every damn prohibitionist scare about marijuana you could possibly ask for. So I have made 6 infographics that I'm distributing throughout my social networks here in Oregon to debunk a lot of this. And let's start with this first one here, which is their little light bulb. How many people are in prison for marijuana? Out of about 14,600 people in Oregon prisons, less than 100 are there for marijuana, and most were sent to prison for dealing marijuana to kids. Well, folks, that is just plain false, and we are going to show you exactly how that is false. 420 Radio obtained this email from the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, and it was requested by the No on 91 campaign's District Attorney Josh Markey. There's a table here, and you can't quite read it on the screen, but the table shows you all of the people convicted. Kelly J. Officer writes, I ran the prison numbers for the intakes that have a most serious conviction of a marijuana offense. This table shows current inmates as of July 7th, 2014, whose most serious conviction is a marijuana offense. There are currently 130 inmates total. 130, not less than 100, like No on 91 claims. Now, if there were 130 marijuana prisoners, for most of them to be dealing to kids, that would have to be 66, right? 50% plus 1. But another look at that table, and I expanded it to show the different charges. The one in red there is delivery to a minor greater than 3 years age difference. There were 31 inmates in prison for delivery to a minor. Even if we add in the yellow lines, delivery within 1,000 feet of a school or growing by a school, that only gets us to 54. And again, just because they were near a school doesn't mean that was delivery to a minor. Most places in a city are within 1,000 feet of a school. Then there's that cost we got to think of. At $84.81 per day to house an inmate, based on the average sentence listed in that email from Kelly J. Officer, there are 130 inmates, and they have cost Oregon almost $8.6 million. Measure 91's a better approach. Tax and regulate those who wish to grow and sell. Legalize those who wish to shop and consume. Now we've got another debunk for you. This one is what I call the spaghetti test. This is where they throw a bunch of stuff up on the wall and let's see what will stick. And they say up at the top here, Oregon can learn from Colorado's mistake. And the way they call it a mistake is by making a few scary claims and ignoring positive results. Like $45 million in tax revenue, not mentioned. 18,000 new jobs, not mentioned. Eliminating 7 out of 8 marijuana arrests, not mentioned. Serious crime dropped 10%, not mentioned. Tourism revenue went up 6%, not mentioned. And in fact, Colorado's teen use has dropped in 2 successive surveys, while the U.S. teen use has risen, both among teens who use monthly and teens who have ever used marijuana. The drop in Colorado is greatest among younger teens, and Colorado teens find it harder to access marijuana than their U.S. counterparts. And the fact is that positive tests for marijuana do not prove a driver's impairment. They only prove someone is a marijuana user. There are probably more married gay people in fatal accidents too, now that marriage equality for gays is legal. The real question is, how safe are the roads? In Colorado, the roads have been safer than the national average since 2005. And a recent DUI checkpoint of over 1,500 cars netted 20 alcohol DUIs and 0 marijuana DUIs. Nobody wants children or adults to be harmed by marijuana. That's why we're calling for legalization. So kids are carded and adults get inspected and labeled marijuana. But scaring people with statistics about hospital visits is intentionally misleading. When a substance is illegal, fewer people want to report to authorities that they're using it, even if it is making them sick, because they fear prosecution. If reports of domestic violence rise when we open up anonymous tip lines, we don't think tip lines made spousal abuse rise. We understand that spousal abuse was already happening, but was underreported. So too are problems with marijuana underreported because of its prohibition, and regulation will better address those problems. Remember, No on 91 derives 98.6% of its funding from law enforcement agencies that have a vested interest in maintaining the asset forfeiture bounty and easy arrest statistics of prohibition. Another part they try to scare us about here in the No on 91 campaign flyer, a picture of a bag that has an ounce of weed in it versus a picture of a bag that has 8 ounces of weed on it and the label 400 joints. They're trying to scare everyone by saying Oregon's Measure 91 allows people to have a whole lot of marijuana, just like Colorado and Washington do. Got to go back to that. So here's the limits of Measure 91, and they happen to match the limits in the first 2 legal states of Colorado and Washington and improve on some other limits. In Washington, you can have an ounce of marijuana outside the home. And in Colorado. And in Oregon. It's exactly the same. In Oregon, you can have 4 marijuana plants. Now, that's less than Colorado's 6 marijuana plants. In Oregon, you can have 8 ounces of marijuana in the home. That's less than the unlimited amount of marijuana you can have in the home in Colorado. In Colorado, they allow you to keep the results of your harvests in the place where you grew the marijuana. That could be 20 pounds. Officer, this is the results of my harvests. Measure 91 is going to allow 16 ounces of marijuana-infused edibles, just like Washington State, and less than Colorado. The law in Colorado allows you to have 1 ounce of THC in any form. So those brownies, you could have 3 pounds of brownies as long as they just had an ounce of THC in them. Same thing goes for the marijuana-infused liquids. Same limit as Washington State, 72 ounces, and less than the limit in Colorado, which again is 1 ounce in an infused liquid. That could be 80 gallons, as long as you just put 1 ounce of THC in it. And as far as concentrates go, we're going to be allowed an ounce of concentrates in Oregon, just like Colorado, because again, Colorado, you can have an ounce of THC in something, but that could actually be more than an ounce of concentrate, since concentrates aren't 100% THC. And furthermore, Oregon is the only state of the three that will explicitly ban the home manufacture and possession of home manufactured concentrates. No other state is going to have an explicit ban on homemade concentrates. There's nothing new about legalizing marijuana anymore, folks. Regulation has been proven to be a better approach than prohibition. Measure 91 takes the best of Colorado and Washington and improves it. Another piece of the spaghetti scaremongering, throw it against the wall and let's see what sticks, comes at the top of their postcard, where they worry that big marijuana business targets kids, youth use will increase, there's too much marijuana allowed, it's not your father's Woodstock weed, there's no DUI standard, it feeds the black market, and it loses money. Whatever they can throw out to see if it'll stick, and all of these fears are so easily debunked with just a little common sense. First of all, adults are the fastest growing market for legal marijuana, and they're particularly fond of medicated edibles. Think about it. According to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, in 2002, there were 2 teenage marijuana users for every 1 senior over the age of 50. In 2012, there were 3 senior marijuana users for every 2 teens. Since smoking is forbidden most everywhere, adults prefer edible options. The stores in Colorado and Washington can only sell to adults, and the product is flying off the shelves. The youth use of marijuana is down over the last 2 Colorado Healthy Kids surveys, and teens in Colorado rate marijuana more difficult to access than teens do nationwide. Oregon is allowing the same or lower limits on marijuana possession than Colorado and Washington. Don't be misled. Oregon will only allow 1 ounce outside the home, just like Colorado and Washington do. And the 8 ounces allowed in the home is less than what Colorado allows. As far as the Woodstock weed, marijuana potency is irrelevant. High is high. This scare about the Woodstock weed misleads you to think that marijuana is better or worse depending on potency. Look, marijuana gets you high. Whether you smoke 5 Woodstock joints to get high, or 1 modern joint to get high, or a dab to get high, high is high. And as far as driving, legalization does not invent cars and marijuana. Driving under the influence is illegal now. Oregon's had 69,000 medical marijuana patients and has had legal medical marijuana since 1998. If there was going to be an epidemic of stoned driving, we would have seen it by now. And yet Oregon's roads are safer than the national average. And as far as there a black market not going away, look, there will always be a black market for anything. There's a black market in DVDs. There's a black market in cigarettes. But legalization takes away most of the black market and depresses the profit for the rest of the black market. I mean, you really got to be desperate to scare people about a tiny black market after legalization when now the entire market is the black market. And finally, about this $1 cost for every, or $10 cost for every $1 in taxes. Yeah, that's true of alcohol and tobacco because those are toxic and addictive drugs, unlike marijuana. Oregon's Legislative Review Office estimates that Measure 91 is going to generate $17 to $40 million in tax revenue. Colorado's already made $45 million. Has anybody heard a claim that Colorado's had $450 million in social costs? I don't think so. That's the first 3 of our debunkers on the Measure 91 postcard. If you want to see the other 3, stay with us for Toker Talk Radio, Hour 2, starting at 4 o'clock. We'll give you the rest of the debunkers. We've got an interview with Charlo Green. High Times talks to Charlo Green from Alaska, the reporter who said, "Fuck it, I quit." And more coming up on Toker Talk Radio, Hour 2 of the Russ Belville Show. That's all for Hour 1. Thanks for joining us. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it,